It's time for another story time. Okay, so Gia Plante asked us to do our love story, asked me to do our love story. And Carson Maddox asked me to do a story time. So kill two birds with one stone. And, all right, when I first started my channel about 2 years ago, I did a lot of my stories of my life, you know, one after the other. And, but they're way back. You have to scroll down, way down to see them. And so most of you haven't seen them. And so I was thinking, well, I don't know if I can do my love story because I've already done it. But then I saw the movie called Hello, My Name is Doris with Sally Field. And it reminded me so much of my life, believe it or not, that I thought, well, I can take this from a different angle. So, how did my life look like the life of Doris in the movie that of Sally Field? And by the way, she's one of my very all-time favorite actresses. Okay, the story of Doris, if for those of you who haven't seen it, Hello, My Name is Doris, is that she was this kind of like lady that, she was kind of like a hoarder, bag lady type of person that kind of lived in a dream world where she thought that she was, you know, she fixated on this one young guy. She was already old. That's different than my story. She was already old, and she fixated on this young guy and was convinced that he was in love with her. And then she ended up asking, saying, you know, are we going to get married? Well, how did that look like my life? In my 20s, all right, going back further, I never, ever, ever had anybody ever interested in me. I guess because I was so insecure. But anyway, and I went through my stages of ballooning and gaining weight, losing weight, you know, my face breaking out, etc., etc. And I was just lived in a life of insecurity. But anyway, so, but at different times in my life, I would be convinced, 4 different times actually, that God, I would throw God into the picture. God had designed me to marry a certain guy. And I mean, this poor innocent guy would maybe be nice to me or say a nice sentence here or there or whatever, and he likes me. And I would do what Sally Field did and just create this whole thing in my mind, that until I finally had us walking down the aisle, and I would approach these 4 different times in my life, I approached 4 different guys and completely humiliated myself. It's the truth. And of course, all of them were, sorry, I don't have any feelings for you. I'm not even attracted to you. One guy said, devastation, devastation. No other words. Anyway, so what happened? How did I finally hook the right one? And he was the right one. He really was the one that God had for me. Well, that too was very unusual and wonderful, and it turned out afterwards in retrospect that our lives had crossed, our paths had crossed at different times, and we hadn't even known it. Hi, Kizzy, did you come to visit? Come and say hello. There she is. So our paths had crossed at different times, and but I'm getting ahead of myself. What happened was, I finally had kind of given up on marriage, you know. Well, I still was having to, I still had in my path that I was going to approach one other guy who was the wrong guy. But, so, all right, I had been on the mission field. I had been a Christian and a missionary all over the world. And Jose had been living in Miami, and he had become, I didn't know him, he didn't know me, but we had become Christians at the same time. He's 2 years older than me, and so I was 2.5 years older, so I became a Christian when I was 22. He became one when he was 25. And then he pretty much was planted here in Miami, whereas I was all over the world. And anyway, he had been kind of like a playboy type before, that's what he says, before he became a Christian. And then he kind of went celibate for 9 years, waiting for a wife. And he would see everybody, all his friends getting married, and he was so distraught. I want to get married. Well, from his side, finally he came to the place where he just figured he was going to be married to God, and he, I guess, kind of like, just married to God, not get married, and he wasn't worried about it, and he was just living the life of just following the Lord. And meanwhile, I was over in England, and then Colombia, and then Puerto Rico, and doing all the things I said of fantasizing and thinking that this was the one for me, etc., and humiliating myself. I get to Miami, and I was here for a year and a half before my eyes were open to Jose. And during that time, I had my eyes fixated on this other guy. And my heart was broken once again. Meanwhile, I had been friends with Jose. Oh, I forgot. Back when I lived in Puerto Rico, I felt God tell me that before I reached the age of 31, while I was still 30 years old, I was going to meet my husband. I felt like he said that I was going to know who my husband was. But I just, knew that something was going to happen before I turned 31. So I get here, and so I'm desperate to know, to get married. I'm desperate. And time is ticking, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, it's almost my birthday, and I still don't have my hook in the sky. What am I going to do? And so I get up, all the nerve I can get up, and I do it again. And I say, I call him up and I say, I really think, before that I had been kind of like hounding him, like I befriended his sister, and so just so I can be in his presence. I was so manipulative, just terrible. And it's got so merciful. So anyway, I was turned down again. And I gave up. I spent a week weeping, devastated, until I finally came to the place where finally, for the first time in my life, I was willing to not be married. And I just thought, well, God, you have put in my heart a desire to to have kids, a desire to be married. I guess I'm not going to be married, but I need to be around children. I love children. And so I figured, well, maybe he'll give me an orphanage. So I was resigned to the fact that I was not going to get married, and I applied to be a nanny, thinking that that's my only way to have children. And so I was accepted as a nanny. Meanwhile, because I had kind of gotten to the place of just giving up, all of a sudden God opened up Jose's eyes, and he thought, oh, maybe she's the one. And he called me. I didn't call him, and he asked me out on a double date. And so he had been my friend. Oh, I forgot to tell you the part. The reason I was weeping so much is because my birthday came and went. My birthday's October 21st, and it came, and that's when it was that week of my birthday that I called that guy and said, "You're the one." And he said, "No, I'm not." And that's when I spent a week just devastated until finally I came to the place. Well, anyway, it was 10 days after my birthday. So I had heard God right, because I was friends with Jose and I did know who he was when Jose called me on October 31st and said, would you go out on a double date with me? And so on November 5th, we went out on a double date. And that was funny because Jose was balding a little bit. Now you can see that he is bald, but he was starting to lose his hair a little bit. And his mother was so excited that he was going to go out on a date that she went and bought him this thing to grow hair. And so she said, "Put this on. You want to have hair for her." And so he went and he appeared at the door with a burnt scalp. Anyway, so we went out on a double date. And then the next day, he called me up and we went to the movies. And and so I went and he took me to meet his mother for 10 minutes before we went to the movies. Little did I know, okay, so that was November 5th was our first date. November 6th was, this is in 1987. November 6th was our second date, and November 7th was the day that his mother had met me for 10 minutes, and his mother said, "She's the one." And that night, he and I just knew that we were going to get married. We just knew it. And I don't know how. We just started to talk. "Yes, you're the one. Yes, you're the one." And 6 months later, we were married. There you go. So that was our little love story. And a little bit of, "Hello, my name is Doris." Okay.